Jake Morrison checked his equipment one more time as the shuttle approached the crystal caves of Zarian 7. His hands moved with practiced ease over the gear straps and communication devices. Behind him, the alien team members prepared their own equipment in their strange ways. Zextal, the tall four-armed HFY, flexed each of his massive arms and tested his strength enhancers. His gray skin had a metallic shine under the shuttle lights. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, and his 4 arms could lift tons of weight. The HFY came from a world with light gravity, so they built machines to make themselves stronger. Near the back of the shuttle, 2 silicates hummed softly to each other. Resonance of morning and echo of depths looked like walking crystal sculptures. Their bodies were made of living mineral that could see through solid rock by sending sound waves. They spoke by making musical tones that hurt Jake's ears if he listened too long. The strangest member of their team was Cluster Prime. The insectoid creature looked like a person-sized ant, but Jake knew it was actually thousands of small bug-like beings working together as one mind. Cluster Prime could think about many problems at the same time, but it moved slowly and carefully. Jake was the only human on the team. The Galactic Council had insisted on sending him as an observer. They said humans were too weak for dangerous missions like this one. Earth was classified as a death world, which meant the Council thought it was so dangerous that anything living there must be barely surviving. The other species treated Jake like he might break if they looked at him wrong. They spoke slowly around him and asked if he needed help with simple tasks. Zextal had offered to carry Jake's equipment because he thought it was too heavy. The silicates kept checking if the air mixture was right for his fragile human lungs. Cluster Prime calculated the safest paths for him to walk. It made Jake want to laugh, but he kept quiet. He had been a soldier for 8 years. Before that, he grew up on a ranch in Montana where broken bones were just part of life. His sister Katie used to dare him to climb the highest trees and jump over the widest creeks. His father taught him to fix anything that broke and to keep working even when he was hurt. But the aliens didn't know any of that. They saw Earth's storms, earthquakes, wild animals, and harsh weather, and they thought humans must be weak because they lived through such things. They never considered that maybe humans were strong because of those things. The shuttle pilot, another silicates named Harmony of Depths, announced their arrival with a series of bell-like tones. Through the viewport, Jake could see the crystal caves stretching deep into the planet's surface. The caves were beautiful and deadly. Sharp crystal formations stuck out from every surface like frozen lightning. The whole system was unstable because of underground earthquakes. That was why they were here. The caves contained rare crystals that could power faster than light engines. The Galactic Council wanted to mine them, but they needed to study the cave system first. Every previous expedition had failed because the caves were too dangerous. Zextal stood up and addressed the team. Remember, we must be careful. The caves are not stable. Any loud sound or vibration could cause a collapse. We will work slowly and safely. The silicates chimed in agreement. We will use our resonance abilities to map safe paths. We must avoid the weak spots in the cave structure. Cluster Prime's 1,000 voices spoke as one. All variables have been calculated. Success probability is 73.6% if we follow safety protocols exactly. Jake nodded along with the others, but he was thinking about something different. He had read all the reports from the failed expeditions. Each team had been too careful. They spent so much time avoiding risks that they never accomplished their mission. Then, when something went wrong anyway, they were not ready to handle real danger. The shuttle landed on a flat area near the cave entrance. The team gathered their equipment and stepped outside. The air was thin but breathable. Jake felt comfortable, but he noticed the others struggling a bit. Zextal's breathing was heavier than normal. The silicates moved more slowly. Cluster Prime's coordination seemed off. Jake realized that his human lungs used to Earth's thick atmosphere, were working just fine in the thin air. His heart, strengthened by Earth's heavy gravity, pumped blood efficiently even in the lighter gravity of Zarian 7. His muscles, built for Earth's harsh conditions, felt strong and ready, but he didn't say anything. Let them think he was the weak. 1. The cave entrance was a massive opening in the crystal formations. Beautiful blue and green lights reflected off the walls. Jake could see why the caves were valuable, but he could also see the danger. Cracks ran through many of the crystal formations. Some areas looked ready to fall at any moment. Zextol took the lead, using his 4 arms to carefully move aside loose crystals. The silicates followed, humming constantly to map the cave structure. Cluster Prime came next, calculating the safest steps. Jake brought up the rear, officially there to observe and document. They moved deeper into the caves. The crystal formations grew larger and more complex. Jake took pictures and made notes, but he was also studying the cave structure with eyes. Trained by years of climbing mountains and exploring dangerous places, the aliens were focused on the immediate dangers. Jake was looking at the bigger picture. He noticed stress patterns in the crystal walls. He saw how the whole cave system was connected. He realized that the greatest danger was not from small collapses, but from the possibility that the entire network of caves could shift at once. 2 hours into the expedition, they reached a large chamber filled with the most valuable crystals. The alien team members were excited. This was exactly what they had hoped to find. They began setting up equipment to study and catalog the crystals. Jake was studying the chamber walls when he felt it. A small vibration in the stone under his feet, then another one. He had felt the same thing before earthquakes back on Earth. "We need to leave," Jake said quietly. Zextol looked up from the crystal he was examining. "Why? We have found what we came for. This is perfect." "The cave is going to collapse," Jake said. "I can feel the vibrations starting." The silicates stopped humming and focused their senses on the cave structure. After a moment, resonance of mourning spoke in worried tones. "The human may be correct. We detect small shifts in the crystal matrix." Cluster Prime began calculating rapidly. Probability of major collapse in next 10 minutes is 34.7% and rising. But before anyone could move, the decision was made for them. A deep rumble filled the cave. The floor shook. Crystal formations began to crack and fall. Jake had 1 second to think before the world came crashing down. In that second, he didn't think about the mission or the valuable crystals or what the Galactic Council would say. He thought about his sister Katie, who had taught him that when everything goes wrong, you don't lie down and quit. You figure out how to keep going. The cave ceiling collapsed with a sound like thunder. Tons of crystal and rock fell in a chaos of noise and destruction. Jake felt something massive hit his left leg and pin him to the ground. Pain shot through his body like lightning. Then everything went dark and quiet. When Jake woke up, he was alone in a small space surrounded by fallen rocks and crystals. His left leg was trapped under a boulder that must have weighed hundreds of pounds. He could tell the bone was broken badly. His communication device was damaged but not completely destroyed. In the distance, he could hear the voices of his alien teammates calling for him. They sounded panicked and scared. They were saying things like the human must be dead and no one could survive that collapse. Jake Morrison lay in the darkness and listened to them give up on him. He thought about his father, who used to say that the difference between surviving and dying was often just refusing to quit. He thought about all the times he had been hurt before and kept going anyway. The aliens thought he was weak because he came from a death world. They were about to learn what a death world actually teaches its children. It doesn't teach them to be weak. It teaches them to be too stubborn to die. Zextol pushed against a massive crystal slab with all 4 of his arms. His muscles strained and his breathing came in short gasps. The thin air made everything harder for him. Sweat ran down his gray metallic skin as he tried to move the debris. That blocked the path to where Jake had been standing. "The human cannot survive this," Zextel said between breaths. "The collapse was too severe. We must focus on recovering his body so we can return it to his people." Echo of depths and resonance of mourning moved slowly through the fallen crystals. Their mineral bodies rang like bells each time they touched the debris. They sent sound waves through the rocks, trying to map what lay beneath. The echoes came back broken and confused. "We cannot get clear readings," Echo of Depth sang in worried tones. "Too much interference from the fallen crystals. But we detect no movement in the areas where the human was located." Cluster Prime stood in the center of the chamber, its thousands of individual parts working together to process the disaster. The insectoid being calculated rescue probabilities, structural stability, and resource allocation. Every calculation pointed to the same conclusion. "Analysis complete," Cluster Prime announced in its unified voice. "Human survival probability is 0.03%. Even if the human somehow avoided immediate death from impact trauma, blood loss and organ damage would cause death within 15 minutes. We should prioritize our own survival and evacuation." But despite their words, the alien team members continued working. They moved carefully through the debris, calling Jake's name and hoping for a response. Their species had evolved on safer worlds where death was rare and usually came slowly. The sudden violence of the cave collapse was foreign to them. Zextul's homeworld had gentle gravity and no dangerous weather. His people had grown tall and strong, but they tired quickly under stress. Their 4 arms could lift enormous weights, but only for short periods. They were built for efficiency, not endurance. The silicates came from a world of stable crystal formations. Their bodies were designed to resonate with minerals and stone. They could see through solid matter and communicate across vast distances. But they moved slowly and carefully because their crystal bodies could shatter if they fell or hit something too hard. Cluster Prime species had evolved on a world where cooperation was everything. Thousands of small beings worked together as one mind. They could solve complex problems and see solutions that individuals missed. But they needed time to coordinate and plan. Quick decisions were difficult for them. None of them understood what it meant to come from a world that tried to kill you every day. Meanwhile, in his stone prison, Jake Morrison was doing what humans had learned to do for millions of years. He was adapting. The boulder that pinned his leg was too heavy to move. Jake could feel that his left leg was broken in multiple places. Bone fragments pressed against his skin. Blood seeped slowly from torn tissue. By alien standards, these injuries were fatal, but Jake had broken bones before. He had been hurt worse than this during his military service. His sister Katie had once fallen from a cliff while they were hiking. She had broken her arm and 3 ribs, but she had splinted the arm with a stick and hiked 5 miles back to their truck. That was just what humans did. Jake pulled out his multi-tool and began cutting strips from his uniform. He made a tourniquet to stop the bleeding in his leg. He used his belt to stabilize the fractures as much as possible. The pain was intense, but Jake had learned to work through pain. He checked his damaged communication device. Most of it was broken, but some parts still worked. Jake began taking it apart, looking for pieces he could use. His fingers worked steadily in the darkness, following procedures he had learned in survival training. Humans had developed tools and technology because their world demanded it. They couldn't rely on natural abilities like the other species. They had to build what they needed and fix what broke. Jake's hands knew how to work with electronics and machinery, because human survival had always depended on such skills. Above him, the alien rescue team was making slow progress. Zextel had managed to move several smaller rocks, but the larger debris required all 4 of his arms working together. He was exhausted after 20 minutes of heavy lifting. I must rest, Zextal said, sitting down heavily. My strength is depleted. The gravity and atmosphere are too much different from my home world. The silicates continued their careful work, but they were also struggling. The unstable crystals made their resonance abilities unreliable. They kept getting false readings and confusing echoes. Their slow, methodical approach was thorough but took enormous amounts of time. We need 17 hours to map safe pathways through this debris, resonance of morning chimed. Perhaps 23 hours to clear enough material for a rescue attempt. Cluster Prime was running calculations continuously, but the numbers were not encouraging. Current progress rate indicates 67.3 hours required for complete debris removal. Oxygen levels in sealed spaces will be depleted in 4.2 hours. Rescue probability continues to decline. The aliens were doing their best, but their best was limited by their biology. They had evolved for their own worlds, with their own challenges. Earth's challenges were different and more brutal. Deep in the rubble, Jake finished rebuilding his communication device. It was crude and would only work for short distances, but it might be enough. He tested it by sending a signal to the emergency beacon in his backpack. The signal was weak, but clear. Jake began working on his next problem. He needed to free his leg or find another way to move. The boulder was too heavy to lift, but Jake had learned that problems usually had multiple solutions. He began examining the rocks around the boulder, looking for leverage points. His damaged leg throbbed constantly, but Jake pushed the pain to the back of his mind. He had learned this trick during his military training. Pain was just information. It told you something was wrong, but it didn't have to stop you from thinking or working. Jake found a smaller rock that he could use as a lever. He wedged it under the boulder and began applying pressure. The rock moved slightly, not enough to free his leg, but enough to give him hope. While he worked, Jake thought about his alien teammates. They were good people, but they didn't understand what humans were capable of. They thought Earth was a death world because it was dangerous. They didn't realize that dangerous worlds created dangerous creatures. Humans had survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions. They had lived through droughts and floods and earthquakes. They had faced predators with bigger teeth and stronger muscles. They had done all of this without 4 arms or crystal bodies or hive minds. They had survived because they were too stubborn to give up and too clever to stay helpless. Jake's improvised lever slipped and the boulder settled back into place. He repositioned it and tried again. This time, he gained another inch of space. His leg was still trapped, but he was making progress. Above him, the alien voices continued their worried discussions. They were good people doing their best, but their best was limited by their evolutionary history. They had never needed to develop the kind of desperate creativity that humans used every day. Jake smiled in the darkness. His alien friends thought he was dying. They were trying to save him, but they were also planning his funeral. They had no idea that he was just getting started. The boulder shifted again, and Jake felt his leg move slightly. He was still trapped, but now he knew the rock could be moved. It would take time and effort, but Jake had plenty of both. He settled in for a long night of work. His alien teammates would learn something about humans before this was over. They would learn that calling Earth a death world was not an insult. It was a warning. 12 hours had passed since the cave collapse. The alien rescue team was exhausted and losing hope. Zexto had collapsed twice from overexertion. His 4 arms trembled from the strain of moving heavy debris for so many hours. The thin atmosphere made every breath a struggle for him. The silicates were working more slowly than ever. Their crystal bodies had developed small cracks from the constant impacts with fallen rocks. Echo of Depths was making worried harmonic sounds, indicating structural stress in her mineral form. Cluster Prime's coordination was becoming unstable. Some of the individual insects that made up the collective were making decisions on their own, which confused the group mind. The stress of the rescue operation was breaking down their unity. "We must accept reality," Zextal said, his breathing heavy and labored. No organic being could survive 12 hours under tons of stone. The human is dead. We need to focus on our own escape before this cave system collapses further. Then Jake's voice crackled through their communication devices. "This is Morrison. I'm mobile and moving toward your position. Estimate 40 minutes until I reach the main chamber." The aliens froze. For several seconds, none of them could speak. The voice was clear and steady, with no signs of pain or distress. It sounded like someone giving a routine status report. Zextal grabbed his communicator with shaking hands. "Morrison, is that really you? Are you injured? How did you escape the collapse?" "I'm operational," Jake replied. "Minor injuries, nothing critical. I've cleared my immediate area, and I'm working my way through the debris field. My equipment is mostly functional." The aliens looked at each other in confusion and growing fear. Cluster Prime began rapid calculations. Impossible. The boulder that fell on the human weighed 847 kilograms. No being of his size and muscle density could move such weight. Additionally, our scans showed severe trauma to his lower extremities. Resonance of mourning sent deep sound pulses toward Jake's location. The echoes that came back made her crystal body ring with distress. "The readings are wrong. They must be wrong. The human's biological signature shows impossible adaptations." "What?" The aliens couldn't understand was the choice Jake had made in the darkness. 3 hours after the collapse, Jake had realized that the boulder couldn't be moved. His leg was too badly damaged to heal properly, even if he got free. The broken bones had punctured blood vessels and torn muscles beyond repair. By alien standards, this meant death or permanent disability. But Jake Morrison had grown up hearing stories from his grandfather, who had lost his left arm in a farming accident when he was 25. Grandpa Morrison had lived another 60 years with one arm, running his ranch and raising his family. He used to tell Jake that the human body had more parts than it needed, and losing one just meant you had to get creative with the others. Jake had made the calculation that every human soldier learns, sometimes you have to sacrifice part of yourself to save the whole. Using his multi-tool as a surgical instrument, Jake had performed a field amputation just below his knee. He had used strips from his uniform as tourniquets and antiseptic from his first aid kit to prevent infection. The procedure had taken 2 hours and required him to stay conscious through levels of pain that would have killed most alien species from shock. But humans had evolved on a world where pain was a daily companion. Their nervous systems had learned to process trauma as survivable information rather than a death sentence. Jake's brain treated the amputation as an extreme but manageable medical procedure. Now, he was moving through the debris on one leg and a makeshift crutch carved from a crystal formation. His vital signs were stable because human physiology was designed for crisis management. His cardiovascular system could function efficiently even under severe stress. His blood chemistry adapted quickly to trauma and blood loss. The aliens monitored his approach with growing disbelief. Their instruments showed a being with massive tissue damage who should be unconscious or dead, but who was instead moving steadily toward them and maintaining coherent communication. "Morrison," Echo of Death sang in confused tones, "our scans indicate severe structural damage to your locomotion systems. How are you achieving mobility?" "Improvised solutions," Jake replied. "Standard human emergency protocols. I'll be with you in 20 minutes. Zextal's 4 arms trembled as he processed this information. On his world, injury meant rest and healing in controlled medical environments. The idea of continuing to function with major trauma was literally inconceivable to his species. Cluster Prime's collective intelligence was struggling to incorporate data that violated their fundamental understanding of biology. The human's behavior exceeds all known parameters for organic survival. We cannot calculate how he is achieving these results. When Jake finally emerged from the debris field, the alien stared in what could only be described as horror. He was moving efficiently on his improvised crutch, his remaining leg supporting his full weight. His uniform was torn and bloody, but his movements were controlled and purposeful. Most terrifying of all, he was calm. "Good to see you're all okay," Jake said, as if he hadn't just performed surgery on himself with a pocket knife. "What's our situation with the exit routes?" The aliens couldn't answer immediately. They were trying to process the sight of a being who had removed part of his own body and continued functioning normally. In their evolutionary history, such things simply didn't happen. Zexto found his voice first. "Morrison, your leg. How are you still alive?" Jake looked down at his missing limb with the same expression he might use to notice a torn shirt. It was damaged beyond repair and preventing mobility. Standard protocol is to remove non-functional components and adapt operating procedures. The way he said it, so matter-of-fact and practical, made the aliens realize they were dealing with something far beyond their understanding. Jake wasn't just surviving impossible injuries. He was treating those injuries as minor inconveniences, resonance of mourning. Sent careful sound pulses at Jake's body, trying to understand his physiology. The readings showed elevated stress hormones, but they were within functional ranges. His heart rate was high but steady. His brain activity showed patterns of problem-solving rather than trauma response. "Your species," she sang slowly, "your species is not like others." Jake checked his equipment and looked around the chamber, assessing their tactical situation. "We need to move. This cave system isn't stable. I can hear stress fractures developing in the upper sections. We have maybe 2 hours before another major collapse." Cluster Prime's thousands of voices spoke in unison, but there was uncertainty in their tone. "Our calculations suggest that evacuation will require 4.7 hours minimum. The exit routes are blocked by debris that exceeds our ability to clear." Jake studied the blocked passages with eyes that had learned to see solutions where others saw only problems. Growing up on a ranch in Montana had taught him that there was always another way if you were willing to work hard enough and think creatively enough. "The main exit is blocked, but there's a secondary route through the upper crystal formations," Jake said. "It's a vertical climb, about 60 meters. Difficult, but doable." Zextol's forearms moved in a gesture of dismay. "Impossible. The climb requires full use of all limbs. Even with 4 arms, I am not certain I could manage it in this thin atmosphere." Jake looked at the crystal wall that rose above them like a frozen waterfall. Sharp edges and unstable formations made it treacherous even for an experienced climber. With full mobility, attempting it with one leg should have been suicide, but Jake Morrison had learned to climb in the Rocky Mountains, where a mistake meant death and the weather could change from sunny to deadly in minutes. He had climbed ice walls and rock faces that would terrify most humans. This crystal formation was just another problem to solve. "I'll take point," Jake said, already planning his route up the wall. "I can set anchor points and guide ropes for the rest of you." The aliens stared at him in complete silence. They were beginning to understand that they had spent the entire mission protecting someone who didn't need protection. They had been worried about the wrong species. Jake Morrison stood at the base of the crystal wall and studied the climb ahead. 60 meters of sharp, unstable formations stretched above them like a frozen storm. The crystals were beautiful but deadly. One wrong move would send razor-sharp. Shards falling on anyone below. The alien team members watched him with a mixture of fear and fascination. They had seen him emerge from the debris field missing a leg, but walking steadily. Now he was proposing to climb a wall that would challenge even healthy members of their species. "This is madness," Zextol said, his forearms gesturing helplessly. "The climb is impossible even for me, and I have full use of all my limbs. You cannot attempt this with such severe injuries." Jake tested his improvised crutch against the crystal wall. The makeshift device was carved from a broken crystal formation and wrapped with strips from his uniform. It looked crude, but it held his weight solidly. "I've climbed worse," Jake said simply. "The key is to plan your route and trust your equipment." Cluster Prime's thousands of voices spoke in worried unity. "Our calculations show a 97.4% probability of fatal accident. Even if you survive the climb, your damaged physiology cannot handle the stress of such extreme exertion." What the aliens didn't understand was that Jake's physiology had been shaped by millions of years of evolution on a world that demanded such extremes. His cardiovascular system had developed to function in Earth's crushing gravity and violent weather. His heart was a powerful pump designed to push blood through a body that regularly faced physical challenges that would kill most alien species. His bone density was 3 times higher than galactic average because human bones had to withstand the constant stress of Earth's gravity and the impact of running, jumping, and falling on hard surfaces. His remaining leg could support loads that should have snapped it because human bones were built like reinforced concrete. Most importantly, his nervous system processed pain and injury differently than other species. Humans had learned to function through levels of trauma that would disable other beings. Pain was information, not a shutdown command. Jake began his climb. He moved slowly and carefully, using his one good leg to push upward while his arms found handholds in the crystal formations. His improvised crutch served as a third support point, allowing him to maintain balance on the vertical surface. The aliens watched from below with growing amazement. Jake's movements were controlled and efficient. He tested each handhold before putting his full weight on it. When crystals broke away, he adjusted his route without panic or hesitation. 20 meters up the wall, Jake paused to hammer a metal spike into a crack in the crystal formation. He attached a rope to the spike and dropped the other end down to his teammates. "Zextol, you're next," Jake called down. "Use the rope for support, but don't put your full weight on it. Test each handhold before you commit." Zextol looked at the rope with all 4 of his arms trembling. "I cannot. The atmospheric pressure is too low. My strength is depleted. I will fall and die." "No, you won't," Jake said firmly. "Your species evolved for efficiency, not endurance. But you're stronger than you think. You just need to pace yourself." Jake began coaching Zextol through the climb. He explained how to conserve energy, how to use leg muscles instead of arms, how to rest by hanging from secure holds. Techniques that Jake had learned from human climbing instructors, who understood that the human body was capable of amazing things when properly trained. Zextol began to climb. His movements were clumsy at first, but Jake's steady voice guided him upward. The Kethver discovered that his 4 arms, while not built for endurance, could support him in ways that 2 armed species couldn't manage. "Good," Jake encouraged. "Now use your lower arms to find the next handhold while your upper arms support your weight. You're doing fine." Below them, the silicates watched in crystalline amazement. Echo of Depth sent sound pulses upward to map the climbing route. The human is creating a path that maximizes structural stability. His route selection is perfect. Jake had reached the halfway point when a section of crystal broke away under his hand. Sharp fragments fell like knives, but Jake had already shifted his weight to his other supports. He found a new handhold and continued upward without missing a beat. The aliens below realized they were watching something extraordinary. Jake wasn't just surviving the climb despite his injuries. He was performing better than any of them could have managed while healthy. "Your turn," Jake called to resonance of mourning. "You're lighter than Zextol, but your body is more fragile. Move slowly and test everything twice." The silicate began her climb with musical tones of worry. Her crystal body could shatter if she fell, but she trusted Jake's guidance. He had set anchor points every 10 meters, and his route avoided the most unstable formations. Jake continued upward, his remaining leg driving him higher with each step. Sweat ran down his face, but his breathing was steady. His heart rate was elevated, but not dangerous. His body was performing exactly as evolution had designed it to perform. At 40 meters, Cluster Prime began their climb. The insectoid collective had difficulty with individual decision-making, but Jake's constant guidance helped them coordinate their movements. Don't overthink it, Jake advised. Your body knows how to climb. Trust your instincts and follow the route I've marked. The most remarkable thing was Jake's attitude. He moved up the deadly crystal wall like he was taking a casual hike. He offered encouragement to his teammates, pointed out interesting crystal formations, and even made jokes about the view. You know, Jake said as he set another anchor point, this reminds me of climbing with my sister Katie back home. She always said the best views came from the hardest climbs. The aliens couldn't understand his calmness. They were facing a life or death situation that required maximum effort and concentration. Jake was treating it like a normal day at work. Near the top of the wall, Jake encountered the most difficult section. The crystals here were thin and sharp, offering few good handholds. A normal person would have been stopped by this obstacle. Jake Morrison had learned to climb in conditions where normal people died. He had scaled ice walls in blizzards and rock faces in thunderstorms. He had climbed when exhausted, injured, and running out of time. He found tiny holds that others would have missed. He used techniques that required perfect balance and complete trust in his equipment. He moved past the difficult section like water flowing around a rock. When Jake reached the top of the wall, he immediately began setting up a pulley system to help his teammates with the final section. He worked quickly and efficiently, his hands moving with practiced skill. One by one, he guided the aliens up the wall. Zextal's 4 arms gave him advantages once he learned to use them properly. Echo of Depth's light weight allowed her to climb safely despite her fragile crystal body. Cluster Prime's collective intelligence helped them solve climbing problems that would have stopped an individual. When the entire team reached the top, they looked back down at the wall they had just climbed. In the distance they could hear the rumble of another cave collapse. The route they had taken was now the only way out. Zextal looked at Jake with something approaching awe. You saved us all. Without your guidance, we would have died in the caves. Jake checked his equipment and looked toward the exit. We're not out yet, but we're getting there. The aliens were beginning to understand something important. They had spent the entire mission thinking that Jake needed their protection, but Jake had never needed protection. He had needed a team to protect. They were learning what it meant to evolve on a death world. It didn't make you weak. It made you into something that could survive anything. The team reached the cave exit just as the sun was setting on Zarian 7. The purple sky cast strange shadows through the crystal formations. Jake led them out of the underground passages, his improvised crutch clicking against the stone floor with each step, but their relief was short-lived. Their shuttle sat damaged on the landing area, crushed under fallen crystal debris from the seismic activity. The main engines were destroyed. The communication array was bent and broken. Pieces of the hull were scattered across the ground like metal confetti. Zextal walked around the wreckage with all 4 arms hanging to feet. Total destruction. The shuttle cannot be repaired with available resources. Echo of Depths sent sound pulses through the damaged craft. Her crystal body rang with sad tones as the echoes revealed the extent of the damage. All primary systems are non-functional. Life support, navigation, propulsion, everything is destroyed. Cluster Prime examined the debris with their collective intelligence. Thousands of insectoid parts work together to assess their situation. Emergency pod is intact but can only carry 4 passengers. Main rescue beacon requires manual operation and constant power input. 1 person must remain to maintain signal while others evacuate. The mathematics were brutal and simple. 5 team members, 1 4-person escape pod, and a rescue beacon that needed someone to stay behind and operate it manually. Someone was going to die so the others could live. The aliens began their calculations immediately. It was the logical thing to do. Each species started running probability assessments and value judgments to determine who should be sacrificed to ZEOXTOOL's people. Had rigid hierarchies based on social value and reproductive potential. Echo of Depths came from a society that measured worth by crystal purity and harmonic resonance. Cluster Prime used mathematical optimization to determine the greatest good for the greatest number. They spoke in quiet voices, running through scenarios and weighing options. Who was most valuable to their respective civilizations? Who had the best survival skills? Who had dependents waiting at home? Jake Morrison listened to their discussions for about 30 seconds. Then he walked over to the damaged beacon array and began examining the control systems. "I'll handle the beacon," Jake said simply. "Get to the pod." The aliens stopped talking and stared at him. Zextel's 4 arms moved in agitation. "No, Morrison. You cannot volunteer for this. We must calculate the most logical choice based on survival probability and social value. The human has already sustained massive trauma," Cluster Prime agreed. "His survival chances are lowest even without the additional risk factors." Jake looked up from the beacon controls with a slight smile. "You guys still don't get it, do you?" He turned back to the equipment and began connecting power cables. His hands moved with steady confidence, making repairs and adjustments that the aliens hadn't even attempted. "On Earth, we have a saying," Jake continued as he worked. "A ship's captain goes down with his ship. It doesn't matter who's most valuable or who has the best survival odds. Some things are just right." Echo of Depths sang in confused harmonics. "This makes no logical sense. Sacrifice should be based on rational calculation, not emotional responses." Jake finished connecting the main power relay and moved on to the signal amplifier. "Maybe that's the difference between death worlds and safe worlds. You guys evolved where everything made sense, where logic and planning could solve most problems." The beacon hummed to life under his hands. Jake made fine adjustments to the signal strength and transmission frequency. His training in military communications was serving him well. "Earth doesn't care about logic," Jake said. "Hurricanes don't calculate who deserves to live. Earthquakes don't check your social value before they hit. Animals don't run probability assessments before they attack." He looked at his alien teammates. These beings who had spent the entire mission trying to protect him. So humans learned different lessons. "We learned that sometimes you stand your ground not because you're sure you'll live, but because you're sure someone should." Zextel took a step forward with all 4 arms reaching toward Jake. "But the mathematics are clear. Your injured state makes survival nearly impossible. Someone healthier should take this responsibility." Jake activated the beacon's main transmitter. A strong signal shot up toward the orbital station where their ship waited. Almost immediately, they received a response confirming signal reception and estimated rescue time. 6 hours until pickup, Jake announced. "The beacon is stable and I've got good signal strength. You need to get moving before that pod's life support starts running low." Cluster Prime's thousands of voices spoke as one. "We cannot abandon you. Our calculations show that teamwork and resource sharing increase overall survival probability by 43.7%. Jake checked the beacon's power levels and backup systems. Everything was running smoothly. "Your calculations are based on your homeworlds. This isn't your homeworld." He looked around at the hostile landscape of Zarian 7. Sharp crystal formations caught the dying light like frozen lightning. The thin atmosphere made every breath a conscious effort. Unstable ground trembled with ongoing seismic activity. "This is a death world, just like Earth," Jake said. "And I'm a Deathworlder. I know how to survive here because I learned how to survive where survival doesn't make sense." The aliens stood frozen, caught between logic and something they couldn't quantify. Their evolutionary history had taught them to optimize for survival through cooperation and calculation. But Jake represented something different. Resonance of Morning stepped forward, her crystal body ringing with uncertainty. "Your species chooses individual sacrifice for group survival. This is inefficient by galactic standards." "Maybe," Jake agreed, "but it's what we do." The beacon's signal strength wavered slightly. Jake immediately began adjusting the transmission array, his hands moving over controls he'd never seen before, but somehow understood. The signal stabilized and grew stronger. "Besides," Jake added with a grin, "who says I'm going to die? I've got 6 hours to rig up emergency life support and figure out a backup plan." You'd be amazed what a human can build in 6 hours when he's properly motivated. Zexto looked at the emergency pod, then back at Jake. His species valued logical decision-making above all else, but something about Jake's certainty was compelling. "Are you certain about this choice?" Zexto asked. Jake was already pulling components from the damaged shuttle, planning improvements to the beacon array. "I'm certain that you guys need to get moving. And I'm certain that I can keep this beacon running until rescue arrives." The aliens slowly made their way to the emergency pod. Each of them looked back at Jake multiple times, still struggling to understand his decision. Their cultures had taught them that survival was about optimization and efficiency. Jake's culture had taught him that survival was about standing your ground when standing mattered. As the pod launched into the purple sky of Zarian 7, Jake settled in next to the beacon array. He had power for 8 hours, food and water for 12, and enough spare parts to keep the equipment running indefinitely if he was clever about it. 6 hours later, when the rescue ship landed and found Jake still conscious and still maintaining perfect signal strength, they also found something else. He had used the time to write detailed notes about the cave system, analyze the alien physiology data he had collected, and draft recommendations for improved Galactic Council rescue protocols. Because that's what humans did. They survived. They adapted. They stood their ground when others couldn't. And then they figured out how to do it better next time. The aliens had learned something important during their mission to Zarian 7. Earth wasn't classified as a death world because it was dangerous. It was classified as a death world because it had created something far more dangerous than any environment. It had created humans.